what a speech, Honorable Minister. One thing is very sure, you don't need Amitabh Bachchan for sure. You have done it. And I think you have done a fantastic work, better than Amitabh Bachchan. I can tell you, I'm sold. And एक और चीज़ है, राय बदल चुकी है. ये definitely, you have done a fantastic job. What an inspiring journey you are taking the Bihar government. And the investment, what you have brought in, 30,000 crores, all the achievements, what you're achieving, is highly inspiring. And we need more leaders like you. And I'm sure all of us who are here must have got inspired about Bihar. Maybe more projects are coming your way, for sure. Thank you very much for gracing this occasion. And I want to take this opportunity to really welcome you. And I know there are various other dignitaries around here and the industry stalwarts who are here, who have graced the occasion. Good morning, everyone. Hello. And I hope you are going to have a fantastic day today when you spend some time here today. I must say I'm truly excited, and it's a real honor for me to be amongst you, with you on the 9th edition of the Economics Time SCM Summit, which is happening here in Delhi today. What is important is you all are very elite, because only the best of the people will take the time, will make the sacrifice to come for an occasion, for a summit like this. So kudos to all of you, and I want to thank you for coming here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Vikash Agarwal. As you heard, I'm the Managing Director for Maersk South Asia. I represent a company which is transforming significantly from a shipping line company to an integrator of logistics with a very clear vision of improving the life for all by integrating the world. And this is what we stand for today. And I must say, I'm already thrilled with the thought of discussing about the supply chain, which is so close to my heart, where I have spent almost 25 years in this verticals. And this is very, very important because we all don't recognize the powerful invisible hand which works behind everything what we do, everything what we touch. And this is the invisible hand of the supply chain management. There is no part of our life which is not touched by the logistics. Whatever we do, that invisible hand comes into play. And the problem is we did not really recognize it. And maybe perhaps the pandemic brought us to this reality that this invisible hand is so important that we need to understand how a supply chain really works. What is also important to understand, since 1990, with the onset of the globalization, hyper-globalization, we have seen how the world is, or our lives are connected and dependent on what happens across the globe. And this is what is important. We are highly connected and highly dependent. And this very connect also exposes us on the various disruption and all the exposure we take just because something doesn't work. And this is what we need to understand, as when we are a connected world, anything which goes wrong impacts us. And this is why we need to understand how do we start managing disruption. And the topic of disruption takes a very, very important role. And let me bring this to life by asking a simple question to all of you. How many of you are here for the first time ever here? Multiples, yeah? I see a lot of hands. Can I ask you, do you know if there is an emergency here right now, right here? If there is a major fire, there is a major earthquake, how do you need to respond? Do you know anyone? Have you been briefed about the safety? What if a situation arises, if you have to react or respond, how will you respond? We are not. Because by very design, we look for the best case scenario. We don't think about the worst case scenario. And I can tell you from the Bangladesh event, I was there last week, the depot event where the blast happened. Many people have lost their life because they didn't know how to respond. They reacted, and many people lost their life. So let me take this opportunity to achieve two things now. First, let me give you the safety briefing. If there is a fire, emergency, please, to your left, take the fire exit. The good thing is, you need to just run straight. You don't need to look right or left. That's the beauty. You can be out of this place, at least you're safe. The second thing I want to bring home the message is the mindset shift we need to bring about. If we want to manage the supply chain and manage those disruptions in a highly connected world, we need to start by identifying the potential risks, what we face. And this is the first step if we want to really manage the disruption. And this is very, very important. So I hope you get this message. Very important, safety first, which is very close to my heart. I have just seen almost 50 people lost their life in Bangladesh just because they didn't know how to react when there was a fire, which was a very small event, but can happen to us anywhere. The plumbing of global commerce now has rarely been a topic of a newsroom or a boardroom. And in the last 2 years, we have seen how that discussion has come into the boardroom now, and how this has taken a center stage. And this has caused a lot of the supply chain professionals in a very unfamiliar situation now. The attention of the top management and the mandate what is given to the supply chain professional to make a change, the real change, has come to life now. And this is where a lot of the supply chain professionals, they find themselves in a very unfamiliar situation. And this is something not good to feel because you are not used to that attention. And this is where we need to realize we live in a very uncertain world. In the words of Simon Sinek, he mentions all times are uncertain. The only certain thing is uncertainty. And this is a reality. And we need to all recognize we live in a very uncertain world, and we need to start learning to manage the disruption. In a pre-pandemic research by McKinsey, this is a pre-pandemic research by McKinsey, they found out mostly, on an average, an organization faces 2 months of disruption every 3.7 years. So disruption was common. That was pre-pandemic. But post-pandemic, I'm sure the impacts are much larger, much deeper, and this is where we have started to understand the disruptions are becoming very common to us. And the impact it creates to the lives of people, to the businesses, and to our people and the people who work for the companies are immense. And last 2 years have taught us how badly it can impact you. And this is what, as professionals, we need to recognize. Uncertainty is very, very common. We need to be prepared for. In fact, the traditional supply chain structure always seek to optimize the cost, improve efficiencies, and achieve a very stable environment. And the fact is, in a modern world of the supply chain, this has to change now. And we need to learn to reimagine our supply chain, which essentially has to take into account the new world orders, the connected world, the disruption, and there are few glaring development of the macro trends which are happening, which will pose us further disruption which are going to come in further years. I may want to talk about the 4 major macro trends which may further disrupt the economies or will cause impact to your supply chain. The first one, we all know deglobalization. More and more companies have started to talk about to insulate themselves from the knock-on effect or the domino effect of the lockdowns or disruptions. More and more companies are talking about nearshoring, reshoring, regionalization of the supply chain, and that is becoming more and more prevalent. Of course, we all have benefited on the basis of globalization, where the economic growth has been significant because of the free flow of trade, and that is going to impact the future growth. We all need to recognize there is a proper balance we need to achieve, and that is something that is going to really impact the supply chain of the future. The second thing is the climate transition, and this is for real. More and more realization has started to creep in. We are seeing more and more disruptions of floods, earthquakes, fires, which are more directly linked to the impact what we have made to the climate. And this has now become a responsibility of not the governments or the regulatory bodies, but for the private organization, because this is us. This is human being. And as corporate, we can't shy away from that. So the climate transition will pose a significant demand on your supply chain and the way you conduct business and how you're going to redesign your supply chain. The third one is, which is no-brainer, technology acceleration. And this is another big piece of major disruptor, because we all know how technology is gaining pace, how fast the reactions need to be, how our consumers are reacting. Our kids are used to microseconds of responses. And we have been born with where you click a button, it takes some time to buffer, and then, so we are used to lag. And the technology is changing this. Our customers, they demand a response. Our supply chain needs more digitization. We all know without digitization, we are not going to simplify the supply chain. We will never have the control to manage and understand this. And this is where the other third piece, the technology acceleration, is going to disrupt us. And the final piece, the demographic decline. With more aging population, we will start to see the declining workforce, which will impact the economic outgrowth, which will change the future workforce, which will also change monetary policies which the government has to make. So these are four major macro trends I think we all need to be mindful of. So how do we design our future supply chain in view of all what we are seeing? And I want to highlight three major priorities we need to keep in mind. The first one is, we are no-brainer to talk about it, is resiliency. Our supply chain needs to be more resilient. And first step in mitigating the risk is a clear understanding of the potential risk our supply chain has. Which supplier, process, or facilities presents a potential single point of failure needs to be identified. What we also need is which critical inputs may face a shortage or price volatility. This is a very basic step if we want to set up our resilient supply chain. We need to identify the potential risk. Based on 2021 research data, this is again a McKinsey data, and you'll be surprised, less than 50% of the supply chain senior executives recognize or realize the tier 1 suppliers and the risks they have in their supply chain. Only less than 50%, tier 1. And the worst thing is, only 2% of the supply chain executives recognize the risk to their tier 3 suppliers and beyond. And most likely and most commonly, a disruption on your tier 3 and beyond disrupts the whole thing actually. Because this is where there's no focus. This is where there's no preparedness. And this is scary, only 2%. And this is where the companies and the supply chain profession has to really, really dig deeper and take control of the tier 3. What we need is, to build a resilient supply chain, we need less of a third-party logistic provider. We don't need multiple stakeholders in handshakes. You need to simplify this. The nodes of the supply chain has to get more controlled, less and less. You need less mode of transportation. You need less mode of lanes, what you are moving around. You need to create a bigger distance between your factories, your DCs, your suppliers, because at least you can insulate any incident which happens. And those are some of the action which most of you will have to take. You will also have to take a decision to get into more strategic partnership with your supplier. Invest in them. You can't be transactional anymore. That's the gone days. That's the old way. So that is where you got to get more strategic. You got to have a bigger picture, and you got to invest in. And finally, take a clue from the financial crisis of 2008. You clearly remember when the banks started to fail, the first thing they had to take action was to really stress test their portfolio, stress test their balance sheet. And they were individually stress testing. When I say stress testing in the supply chain domain, you need to look into your supply chain nodes individually and simulate a scenario. If one supply chain node fails, how long can you run your supply chain? That is something you have to find out first. How long, if that supply chain node fails, how long can you run it? And the real second action you have to take is to find out how long does it take for you to recover that node. Those are two key things. The stress testing, that's the key one for me. I think that's the key step you can take it if you go back and stress test your supply chain nodes. So those are some of the thoughts I have on the resilience. The second piece is the agility, which I wanted to talk about. This is again, based on the research data again, 77% of these US consumers have either changed the brand, have changed the stores, have changed the buying habits. 77% of the consumers in America have changed during this time. And the reason is, we all know it. They have either moved to the online because of the non-availability of the products. Almost 2/3 of them said they changed it because they did not have the products available on the shelf. And you may lose your customer forever. And you can't imagine the implication you have when you don't have a product on the shelf. You may have lost your customer forever for your life. And this is a very important data point to understand. If your supply chain is not more agile, you may lose your customers forever. The other thing is, in today's world, most of the brands face this challenge of taking control of the peaks and the troughs. And this is very common. We have seen the demand shocks, the supply shocks, the perfect storm, we have seen it. And most of the organization, they lose control there. And the third important piece, if you were to look into the data points, in terms of agility, in a highly social media world, you have heard the story of Netflix, the Squid Game. Just because of that series, we saw a spike of the demand for these shoes, Van shoes, by 78 times overnight. Tell me which supply chain can meet those demands of 78 times. We have another example, Roman Original. Just by one tweet, the demand went up overnight by 15 times for the women dress. And I'm 100% sure none of the supply chain is geared to manage those spikes. And this is where agility starts to become more important as to how do you plan your supply chain. And agility has to be taken very, very seriously. Your supply chain has to be more agile. And when I say agile, because we all work with fixed structures of investments. I have a warehouse which has been signed up for 5 years. More and more customer needs this flexible model now. You need to have huge amount of flexibility in your supply chain so that you can tweak it, you can flex it based on your customers. And just remember, you are in the business of supply chain because of the demand, not because of your supply chain. This is not inside out. You need to look outside in. So all your design has to be driven by what the customer wants you. And this is very, very, very important. When you look at the supply chain, always think about your customer. What can happen, what demand is going to come through. And this is where we need to take some action. Lesson is clear. Fast-moving, fragmented, customer-centric environment demands a very different design of your supply chain. And that is where we need to move on. And future supply chain has to be more dynamic and be able to predict, prepare, and respond to rapidly evolving demands of the customers, the product mix, and the channel mix. And that definitely is going to come through. In short, your supply chain has to be agile. It has to be flexible. I'll come to the last point on sustainability. And this is important. 38% of the Fortune 500 companies have already taken actions on sustainability and set up a significant milestone for 2030, not 2040, 2050. This is now. We are talking about another 5, 7, 8 years. We as a company have accelerated our sustainability milestone by 10 years. We wanted to be net zero by 2050. We have moved it to 2040 and 50% achievement by 2030. And more, more than 50% of the companies have accelerated their journey on this sustainability where they have committed those net zero or carbon neutrality by 2030. And huge amount of work is happening and it's ownership on us. And this is definitely going to create a huge demand in the way we look at business. And as I mentioned to you about the customers, Gen Z, millennials, they are highly sensitive. They demand the companies to be responsible now. They want to see that we can preserve the Mother Earth for the future. It is not only for us to consume it, we need to preserve the Mother Earth for the future. So they are demanding, the companies, most likely tomorrow, in future, I don't know when, you will start to see a price tag with a carbon footprint on individual pieces. This is the future which is going to come through, I'm 100% sure. Customer will demand you to tell them exactly how much carbon have you generated to produce those pieces. So please be mindful of that. And there are hard data which has proven. Example, Henkel has achieved significant cost reduction, energy consumption by 40%. They have avoided waste by 20%. These are hard data. Companies have done it. There are cost benefit. The customers are going to love you, and they are going to promote you. And this is for real. And finally, in summary, forward-thinking chief supply chain officer have to have, this is a once-in-a-life generation opportunity now for all of you to really reshape yourself and bring forth the value what a supply chain can bring to a company, bring to its customer, and bring to its people. And I'll share some more research data by AlixPartner, which is hard data and scary data which was just concluded in first quarter of 2022. 72% of the CEOs are worried about losing their job because of disruption. 72% of the CEOs, global CEOs. 69% of those CEOs have said they are worried about the disruption because of the supply chain. 69% of the CEOs. And finally, 94% of the CEOs said they will see a major change in the business model in the next 3 years. So there are massive amount of change which is coming our way. And the way I see it, no companies can and should look at the supply chain as a cost center now. You can't afford to look at the supply chain as a cost center anymore. You have to be seen as a value enabler. Only then we can create a value for the companies, for our people, for our customers. With that, I'd like to conclude. This is a one-time-in-life opportunity to understand the role you can play in your company. I can't tell you enough. I have got multiple CEOs and the chairmen of the European company who have called me to ask about, can you give me a briefing what is happening in the supply chain in this part of the world? I have never got this kind of calls ever in my life before. I've been in this business for 25 years now. And this is a hard fact. And it's not only me. Our Honorable Minister has talked about it. I mean, he's worried about that logistic, 8 days, and how it essentially can create an ecosystem. If we get the logistic right, the industry will start to come in. And our Prime Minister has this ambition of that $5 trillion economy. Can we set up a hub, international hub in India? It can happen. The investment which is happening on infrastructure to bring down the logistic costs from 14% to 8%, I'm telling you, we will become a hub of a logistic in the future. And there are great, great efforts which have been put in by the government now. It's a golden opportunity for all of us to really take this opportunity and embrace it and make a big difference for our community. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Enjoy the day. Thank you.